I'm telling you right now, if you want to laugh at me, you can laugh at me. Regardless of who you are, you will get COVID eventually if you haven't already had it. You will get it. So what is the price that we were willing to pay for a shutdown for something that you're going to get regardless?
Welcome to LA Legal, where we'll be talking about mask mandates. I'm Liana. Today I am joined by Gilland and Alan. So let's talk about it. There's so much to be discussed. I think there's so many different mandates that have been put in place and then a lot of changes that are coming actually. So tell us about what's happening on Friday.
Los Angeles is lifting the indoor mask mandate for vaccinated individuals.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on, I know you don't follow the news, Alan, so now that you've heard this for the first time, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's way overdue. I think once they achieved some form of vaccination rate, I think a mask mandate was just an extra burden for the adults, but also I think it did a lot of damage to our children who were required to attend classes, play outside with masks to a point where I think we're going to see some psychological issues with them trying to overcome.
So I do want to talk about the kids issue because I think this is where people feel very strongly on both sides. But let me ask you guys this first. So this lift is coming hot right after the Super Bowl. A lot of people got a lot of heat at the Super Bowl because almost everyone there was not wearing a mask. So do you think this lift is coming because of all the backlash? Or is it really, do you think, because we're seeing an actual decline in cases? What are your thoughts?
I do think that there's a lot of reactionary policies sometimes it's just become such a political issue, right?
I 100% agree.
It's become a very political issue, and I think people get mad and say, well, nobody was wearing a mask at this event. And I think a lot of those people, wouldn't. They're against masking generally, but I just don't see. You're not making an argument as to whether masks are necessary or effective when you say, well, they weren't wearing them there, so we shouldn't wear them here. That's not an argument that supports whether masks are effective or not. It's just. You're just saying something, right?
I 100% agree with that statement, but I also think that when someone pushes masks as a proper method of preventing disease from spreading, but then when they're off camera, they're acting completely differently, they lose credibility with me. So we don't have anybody to go by. Again, I'm not a scientist. You're not a scientist. We're not scientists. We have to follow someone's advice. But if the people who push this on us, they themselves, when they're off camera, are not following these rules, it's really discouraging, and it starts you to question: is this really needed? Was this thing like an overreaction, and it had just snowball effect, and just took it over? I've seen a lot of footage of like mainstream media journalists who keep pushing the mask mandate, like who laugh at people. But just before the camera goes on, they're conversing with the person they're interviewing without a mask. But before it comes on, they put a mask on, they go away 6 feet. I'm like, what is this? Like, is it just a show? I mean, if you really are worried, if you believe that, why don't you just practice it yourself? I mean, but I agree with you 100%. Just because someone is not practicing it, it doesn't mean what they're saying is not true. Right. However, they lose credibility over time, and combine that with people kind of being tired of this shit. They're like, enough is enough. When are you going to open this? I mean, you locked down for months. You killed all small businesses. You made our children stay home for 9 months. The children's suicide rate went up through the roof in the last couple of years. Now you're making them to wear masks in school, on playgrounds. It's one thing to require a high school kid to wear a mask. It's completely different when a 6-year-old has to do it. Yeah. You should have seen a video I saw when the teacher announced I think it was in Vegas. It said, okay guys, I have an announcement. Tomorrow, we don't have to mask anymore. The room just erupted.
it was incredible to see. But what I wanted to say is that it's not a one-time Super Bowl thing with
No, it's
somebody
not.
like
I don't think this what we're gonna happen now. Meaning no mandate. I mean, no more masks required. Was an overreaction? Was any reaction to the Super Bowl? That's where everything was going. That's where we was heading. State by state, community by community. Like San Francisco, for example, has nothing to do with LA or.
It doesn't, but you have somebody like Governor Newsom who has now on multiple occasions, while we were all locked up at home, what was it, last year, having dinner, with friends at French Laundry, right? So this is someone who has consistently.
He doesn't care.
He did okay, but that's what I'm saying. So it's not just a Super Bowl. I think the Super Bowl was the icing on the cake, if you will, with people saying, "What the heck."
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think the Super Bowl had any effect on what's going to happen now. I think it was just a natural progression of things that was going to happen. We all knew that mask mandates were not going to stay for forever. There was going to some point they were going to lift them, and then when the states starting when basically right now they're even talking about calling it a endemic, not a pandemic.
Yeah.
There's a discussion among scientists that it's time to stop using the word pandemic because it's no longer a pandemic. And because I think many majority or even more than majority of people have been vaccinated, it becomes kind of burdensome to even enforce the mask mandate. I mean, how do you enforce it?
I think people are just over it, honestly.
I
Endemic
agree.
or not, I think people are over it. I think that our government is seeing more pushback at this point because they are over it, because when you tell people to go get vaccinated, they get vaccinated and they still have to slap on a mask. And just logically, it doesn't make any sense. You walk into a restaurant, you have to be masked up, you sit down, you don't have to wear a mask. I think people are just tired, and I think it's this pushback that helped propel this lift. That's my.
And I also think what people are tired of is that inconsistencies in the law itself. For example, like you just said, you need to have a mask when you walk in the restaurant. You need to have a mask when you walk around to go to the restroom. But when you're seated, regardless of how close people are to you, you don't have to have a mask. I don't think it makes like a logical sense to have, if you're going to require it. If you're not, then you need to have more like a sensible law so they can follow, so they can, because people tend to follow laws that make sense more.
Absolutely.
If something doesn't make sense, they're not going to follow it.
And certainly they don't want to follow it when the people making these rules and regulations and laws are not following them.
Yeah, I agree with Gillen that just because of that, it doesn't mean the law is bad law, because we have speeding laws. So just because like we catch the sheriff, like the head of the sheriff's department speeding, doesn't mean we can speed too, But in this but when it's something new, speeding is something that it's kind of in our brain that it's a bad thing to do. But when we're doing something new, when you're having the population to do something so burdensome, like it's really burdensome to have a mask and walk around with a mask the whole time, you need to lead by example. And when you don't, people are going to say, you know what, if you're not doing it, you don't believe in it. If you don't believe in it, why are you forcing it on us?
So it must be not so bad if you are not even.
It must
following.
be, yeah.
So I think that, I agree.
Especially when it comes to the portions of the population that are not high risk, like our children are not. Like, what's the point? Like you're causing more damage by your overreaction. You're causing more damage to the public than helping them.
I understand, that it's inconsistent, that it doesn't really seem to make sense that you don't wear a mask when you wear a mask when you walk into a restaurant, you take it off when you sit down. But as far as looking at government officials and looking at, we keep bringing up Newsom, it's the laundry thing, the Super Bowl, and he actually was on camera both of those times. He was at the Super Bowl. He knows he's going to be photographed. He knows he might be shown on a big
the Super
screen.
Bowl was the mayor. It wasn't Newsom.
Right,
too.
Garcetti.
Actually, I'm going to fact check both of them. It was
he was holding
Newsom. Wait.
But Garcetti was holding his breath, right?
Yeah, Garcetti was,
He swore.
Garcetti was holding his breath. Newsom took it off out of respect for Magic Johnson. And he said Magic Johnson wanted to take a photo with him, so out of respect, he had to take his mask off.
While he was holding his breath.
I don't know if he was holding
And then he was caught doing it again during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure they were holding
the
their
one
breath
with
for
the
2
Magic
hours.
Johnson was in the NFC Championship game.
Yes, it was in the Super Bowl.
And then he was caught again on camera in the Super Bowl, just having like a drink in his hand and just shooting the.
Yeah, 100%.
Being him.
And I agree that, you want your leaders to embody what they're asking their constituents to do, their community to do. But at the same time, I would consider myself someone who has followed most, if not all, of the COVID rules, been very COVID conscious, since it began. But there have been times where I've forgotten a mask or walked in somewhere. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in the regulations or think that they're proper. Nobody's perfect, and I'm sure that almost all of us could think of a situation where we forgot a mask, or we didn't have one on, or we took it off for a picture, or you took it off to go like, hi, you're not supposed to do that, but everybody has had those instances. But if you're doing the right thing, even 70% of the time, you're still protecting people, you're still protecting yourself. It's not useless because it's not perfect.
Let me ask you a question. If that's the case, when asked about why he didn't have a mask, why did he say he was holding his breath?
Well, he said he was taking a photo, and he said, and I was holding my breath. Look, I get why everybody's laughing at it. I've held my breath in an elevator, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I get it. But
while smiling?
No, I probably had a mask on. They didn't. It was just like holding my breath.
Yeah.
But you can hold your breath while smiling.
The cure to the spread was
still holding my breath.
Holding your breath. Look, it's just comical. I think I get what you're saying, and I totally get it. But I think it's really comical because we know that wasn't the case. I can almost guarantee that wasn't the case. He did not have a mask the entire time. He was photographed at different times, and it's like just come up and be honest. And I think and that's the point I'm trying to get at, is when our politicians are coming up with these
at least Newsom, when he was cut in a restaurant, he came, he said, you know what, I made a mistake, I should lead by example. I respected him for owning it. You know what, I kind of, it was a weak moment, I succumbed to my family's desire to be in a restaurant, and I went with them, and it was a mistake, and I will,
but pair that with holding my breath, then we're already at a point, I think, as a society where we're just so over it, and then we see, our mayor being photographed with no mask, and then his response is, "Why are you guys tripping out? I was holding my." It's comical. It's very hard to follow.
I think it's disrespectful. I think it's borderline disrespectful to the people who are looking for their leaders to
the people who are actually following the mandates.
Right, but it still has nothing to do with whether they're effective or not. It still has whether or not any individual person or any group of people followed it or not doesn't, we could talk about it all we want, and sure, it says something about who they are as politicians, but it says absolutely nothing about the efficacy or lack thereof of masks.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What is the effectiveness of masks for children who attend school where all teachers are vaccinated? Why do we make them wear masks?
I mean, I read a news story just the other day of a little girl who was 10, 11, or 12 in that age range who got COVID from a classmate and died. And I mean, to me, I would wear a mask 365 days a year to prevent one little girl from dying.
I know, but that one little girl, the little girl could have got COVID when she was home with her parents.
I mean, the article that I read traced it back to her parents didn't have COVID,
I'm
and
sure,
the two kids in her class did.
I'm not challenging the article that it's not accurate, but what I'm saying is, why restrict that, but don't restrict parents from going to events and not wearing a mask and bringing home the disease and infecting their children? I mean, it's just it just makes no sense to me.
Because the school is protecting their student body. So if that child gets COVID, but they have a mask mandate, the child gets COVID from their parents.
So they're protecting
then the child comes to school. No, they're protecting their students.
I know they're protecting their students, but the students could, if everyone is like vaccinated and everything is protected, there's no need for this require school children to wear masks to this point. I honestly believe it was an overreaction to allow that.
I agree, and I take issue with kids having to wear masks for 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours, depending if they're in after school programs, even outside. That to me is, I don't care what the efficacy of these masks. Outside, these kids should not be wearing masks, right? I was telling you earlier, I went to pick up a friend's kid. He's 4 years old, and he was dropped off at school at 8 a.m. with a mask, and I picked him up around 5:30. He was outside during an after-school program, and he had been in a mask since 8 a.m. I mean, that's mind-boggling, right? There is no reason for these children to be in school. Fine, maybe I can get on board with classrooms, but outside, they're literally bearing the largest burden, and I don't understand that. Because I can go outside, right? I can take a break, I can go outside and take my mask off. These kids can't, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I understand that argument. Oh, I remembered what I was going to say when you guys were talking about how all the kids cheered when someone said you don't have to wear a mask anymore. They'd also do that if you told them they didn't have to wear shoes anymore or socks anymore or brush their teeth anymore. Kids would do that if you told them they didn't have to wear anything they had to wear all day, every day. But I do think that the conversation that has sprung up around the purported or argued psychological trauma of mandating masks in school is a very important one, because I would really like to use it to call on everyone who is very concerned about the psychological trauma of kids having to wear masks all day, their liberties, and the trauma of not being able to see people's faces, to think about what dress codes do to 11-year-old little girls who can't wear tank tops when they go to school because their shoulders would be so distracting to boys or teachers. But I think it's interesting that I don't hear the same people who are talking about how mask mandates are so psychologically traumatizing to kids saying the same thing about dress codes, which are widespread, targeted to young girls, prepubescent girls, that actually does truly, documentedly, psychologically affect them and their male classmates, because it tells them that it is their responsibility to control the thoughts, mind, behavior of their male peers. It teaches their male peers that it is their job, the girl's job, to control their response to them. That's a horribly psychologically damaging thing, and I haven't heard anybody who's talking about the psychological effects of wearing masks speaking about that. Or there have been 10 school shootings already so far. It's February in 2022. There is a lot of stuff that's going on at schools that's psychologically traumatizing our children, far more than wearing a mask. And so if we're going to start tackling issues or talking about them, I would at least like to see people acknowledge that those things are psychologically traumatizing and have an opinion about those as well.
I don't think you will find anyone who doesn't think that mass shootings do not affect our children. I mean, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're talking about masks and what they do.
Well, we're talking about psychological trauma of children.
Well, you want to talk about psychological trauma of everything that happens to children? We can talk about it. I can talk about social media. I can talk about parents. I can talk about their classmates. I can talk about...
But we're specifically talking about in schools.
Today is about masks. And do the masks affect children or not? I 100% agree with you on the points you're raising. But this conversation, this podcast, it's about do these kids need to wear masks or not?
I don't know.
I'm happy to do podcasts on every little issue or every topic that affects our children.
This is actually an analogy that's been drawn by many people, wearing masks in schools and dress codes.
I'm not saying they're not similar. I'm not saying
that. But it's an analogy to speak about one. You can speak about the other.
I know, but it's easier to fix this problem by saying no mandate. But it's harder.
Why can't you say no dress code?
Wait, you guys are telling me
if you can say no mandate, you can say no dress code.
To cover your nose and mouth than it is to cover your shoulder. I don't see the parallel. I think it's much more traumatic for somebody who, let's say, is special needs, and now they can't see half their teacher's face.
Most children.
Here's the difference why you can't say no dress code.
There's a coalition of children who have disabilities that are very pro-mask and are very anti-lifting the mask mandate in school. A vast majority of there's a large coalition in schools and across the country. So I don't know that is to say that children with differently able children with different needs don't want the mask mandates or being harmed by them.
No, certainly not.
Because in a lot of cases,
children who are more high risk, I'm sure their parents will support the mask mandate. Because if you're a child with like a low immunity or some immunity defect...
No, I'm talking about developmental. Some kids who are, developmentally need a little bit more assistance. Right now, they're sitting in the back of the classroom, and I've read a lot of articles about this. Teachers have a mask on. It's difficult to hear them. Some of these, you know what I mean? There's steps you can take towards it, right? You can wear those masks that have a clear, but then those fog up. So what I'm talking about is that I agree with Alan that there is such a burden on these little kids who are just trying to get through and around and learn, and now they have to sit with a mask all day long. And I especially those little ones in kindergarten, 4 or 5. How old are you when you go to school? What, 4, 3, younger? It boggles my mind that these kids have to sit in the mask all day.
I just don't think that the kids themselves when you're talking about 5 and 6 year olds, especially because we're going on year 3 of the pandemic, that's all they know going to school. They have to put on winter hats when it's cold. They have to put on a lot of things that they don't want to wear, sunscreen, like, you know what I mean? I don't think that they're currently experiencing any sort of different reality than
They are. When they see someone without mask, they get scared.
Pardon?
When if someone approaches them without a mask, they get scared.
Says who?
I've seen it
How many times?
once.
Well, maybe
I don't
just
I don't
share
hang
with you.
out, I don't hang out with kids, unfortunately nowadays, you know. But if I go hang out, I might find some disturbing things they do, you know.
That's not happened to me yet.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, listen, my brother-in-law's kids, my sister-in-law's kids, when they get up from school, they get in the car, they don't want to take their mask off.
Yeah, because
They don't want to take their mask off. Like her mom has to force them. You're in the car. You with me, and they're like, I see it enough that I know that if I see this in my close circle, I'm sure it happens outside of that circle too. And the point is, listen, I agree with you, given that there are other issues that will be more kind of deeply rooted and more important in the long run than the mask requirement for the children, right? But we're dealing with the mask right now. There was a mandate. These kids weren't wearing it before the pandemic, and they're wearing it. So basically, not requiring solves the issue, which, by the way, doesn't mean that some schools may not still require it. Mm-hmm. An individual school, like a private school, may say, I don't care what the government says. I'm still not required to wear masks. Just like there's some schools that have more, like the private schools have a different dress code than the public schools. Public schools really, I mean, you're talking about like dress codes. Have you seen what the public schools like kids wear nowadays? There's really no dress code.
Yes, there is.
The only thing they're trying to like control are things that kind of entice violence,
That's not true.
Well, yeah, they don't want you to go to
Girls
school.
get pulled out of school.
I know
11 and 12-year-old girls every day for wearing a tank top or for wearing a shirt. They bring them into the principal's office. They make them raise their arms up, move around. If they see that the shirt lifts up a little bit, they take you out of class. You have to sit in the principal's
Why do you
office. They
think?
bring you a shirt.
Why do you think? Why
I'm
do
just
you?
saying that
Why
it's
do
not
you?
doing that.
Why do you think they do that?
It's absolutely baseless and sexist.
What are they trying to protect? What are they trying to avoid?
tell me.
Avoid, not protect. Avoid.
I don't know. Most of the justifications are to keep from distracting children. And I think that that's absolutely ridiculous and asinine. That an 11-year-old girl's shoulders would distract an 11-year-old boy.
Okay.
I don't think
Let's
there's a
have some
reason for
11-year-old
it.
boys.
They require masks because people die. I think that is at least at the base level a valid reason, whether you agree that they're effective or not. If the
I agree.
reasoning underneath, that's
Yeah,
valid.
but okay.
Right, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
the reasoning
I-
behind the other is not.
I think the problem here is that the reasoning is there's a lot of basis for the reasoning, right? I agree with you. But I think in application and execution, that's where, because you put a 4-year-old in a mask and you send them off to school, they're going to pull on it, they're going to tug on it, so they're not necessarily wearing it. So it almost defeats the purpose of this child sitting in a classroom for
It's
9
actually
hours.
more dangerous to them to wear a dirty mask.
Because they're wearing a dirty mask. And kids are they're dirty, right? They go play during recess, and then they're like fidgeting around. And so I think I agree. The basis is there. But because in application it doesn't translate as well, it almost becomes useless.
So do
most
you
of the
have a
time.
difference of opinion as a child gets older? Like, is your opinion like based squarely, kids 4 to like 10, and then if they get older, because you're talking about little kids, right?
Even
Right?
the el-
That's
listen,
right.
Does your
even the
opinion
elderly, even the
change
elderly.
to-
I had 2 kids going through high school. My daughter was robbed of her senior year in high school. She did nothing. She was home, depressed, didn't know what to do, doing Zoom meetings. My other kid was while there was like a Zoom class on one side, he was playing basketball with his friends on the other side. Like no one cared. Like no one cared about this well-being of these kids. And now my second kid, he's a senior, and thank God the school has opened, so he at least goes to classes. But God knows what kind of like graduation they're gonna have, what kind of prom they're gonna have. You don't understand like how these kids were robbed of once in a lifetime experiences because of an overreaction to this.
And I think
Do
a
you
lot
mean
of
like
parents,
it was an overreaction last year? You're talking about
I think it
last
was
year, right?
I think it was reaction from day one. I think they first they laughed at Trump when he wanted to shut down the borders and not let anybody come in from like China, like shut down. They were like, that's too much. What are you talking about? Like you're trying to basically do what you always wanted to do to close America, right? And then when things got really bad, they're like, oh, we should have shut down. And then they started like this reactive mechanism to do things, shutting down, everybody going remote, no business can open unless you're an essential business. At the end of the day, I think when you look at it, there will be some analysis done like later, I think, by scientists, some comparable analysis by different countries, the way they handled it. At the end of the day, you're not gonna find much difference in terms of what the end result was. But in the meantime, a lot of people lost a lot in terms of lack of schooling, lack of experiences, lack of education.
Well, everybody did.
Yes, they did. Everybody did. I'm just saying,
Right.
I experienced it firsthand. I saw it, and I felt so bad about it because there's nothing I could do.
Same. I mean, I missed my entire last
Yes.
semester of
Yes.
law school, my
Yes.
graduation,
Yes.
all those things. But
Yes.
it happened to everybody, and it was depressing. I
was,
definitely got severely depressed.
Yes.
It was really upsetting. It was a horrible experience, but it happened to everybody. Life is not cherries and roses. And sometimes you get disappointed. You don't get to do things that you wanted to do.
Absolutely, yes.
But it's a good lesson in what community looks like and what making sacrifices for the greater good looks like, what thinking of others, as much or before yourself looks like, what being cautious looks like, I still don't think that the argument that schools should never have shut down, I just don't know how that would have worked. They tried that with some colleges. They tried bringing kids back for a little while, and they kept having to shut down over and over again because there were these mass outbreaks in schools, in colleges when they first tried, maybe 2021, to bring kids back to college campuses. So I think before the vaccine came out, in a perfect world, COVID would never have happened. We would have never had gone through it, but we did, and I don't think that we could have not shut down schools.
Here's my issue with it. The reason I think it was not reasonably necessary to shut down the schools, because while at the time we protected our kids from getting it, they got it later. All my kids got it later when this thing was over, when the shutdown was over. So this is people I think did not realize, or at the time, that this is something that you really can't avoid getting it. That's my personal opinion.
But before vaccines,
regardless of who you are, I'm telling you right now, if you want to laugh at me, you can laugh at me. Regardless of who you are, you will get COVID eventually if you haven't already had it. You will get it. So what is the price that we were willing to pay for a shutdown for something that you're going to get regardless?
But there were no vaccines then. So teachers, I know that...
I'm talking about post-vaccines. Post-vaccines even. Let's talk about post-vaccines. We have had vaccines for a year and a half.
Schools being shut down, right?
I know, but the vaccines came immediately after the shutdown. They were available.
The vaccines came January 2021, I believe.
I don't know the exact timing,
but
but
January 2021.
was that right?
End of December.
Right, and schools went back, right?
In January.
Next year. No, but
but why 9 months later? Why not open it right away?
Well, because everybody didn't immediately get vaccinated. There were tiers of when you could get vaccinated. It was different in different countries. It's not like January 6th. I think now like 63 or something % of the U.S. population is vaccinated. Like 20% of kids, like 6 to 11, something like that. But
I know the reason why. You know why? But you know why
I
think? I think initially they were thinking that if you get vaccinated, you're not going to get a COVID. That was the initial. Are you gonna say no to that?
Well, I mean, I didn't think that. I don't think if you
No,
read
no.
what anybody said.
What were they saying? What were the scientists saying? What was Dr. Fauci saying
That it would-
initially when the vaccines came?
that it would decrease your risk of death, that it would decrease your risk of severe illness, and
Transmitting.
they said it would decrease, not that it would eliminate.
True at the time during Alpha before Delta came, and it went from 90% to 60% after 4 to 6 months. Now it's at
But
like
people
15%.
still transmit it, yeah.
Of course.
Because of the variants changing, though.
But just to
But
get
they knew
back
that
to
the
your,
viruses will
to your
change. They
original,
knew it was a possibility.
Right, but
They
nobody
should have
told
accounted
you
for
that a vaccine, no one told you a vaccine was going to keep you from getting and spreading COVID. No one, 100%. Or if they did, I'm so sorry. No one you should have listened to.
Unfortunately, the media and stuff wrote stuff like that. So that's what he's talking about.
I mean,
Well-
I don't know what reputable source told you that you would not get COVID or that you could not transmit it. I mean, the
Dr.
rate-
Fauci said it right initially. That's what he was saying.
the efficacy rates of vaccines at the time that they were put out, at the time that I got them, was available. That information was available. I was looking at the differences between Pfizer, Moderna, and it's the efficacy of transmitting it, of getting it severely. Those percentages were out, and none of them were 100%.
But none of them, their percentages are truly correct.
Well,
Whatever they advertised was not correct.
Well,
it was overstated, and the reason it was overstated because they hadn't done enough studies to figure out really what the exact effectiveness of these vaccines are.
Well, they hadn't tested the vaccines on certain variants because certain variants didn't even exist at the time that the vaccines were rolled out. So just because they knew there would be variants does not mean that they were able to reliably test the efficacy of their vaccine because they did not know what the variants were going to look like.
See, I knew eventually when we started with face diapers, we'll end up with the vaccines. I mean, I just knew it.
I'm gonna circle this back to the mandates before this becomes a part 2 of this podcast.
Yeah.
But just to answer your initial question, I want you to answer this too. So yes, do I think that I think we can all agree, regardless of where you stand on this, that little kids are least susceptible to, yes, it happens, the little 6
yes, no, you bet,
they're
yes.
least susceptible to contracting COVID, and if they do, dying from it or having any kind of long-term serious. Do you agree?
Yes, to die. I don't know about contracting. You're probably right about that, and I don't think that we know enough to know.
I think it's more.
I don't know because it hasn't been long.
I think children are the choice statement is they can get it as fast as anybody else. It's just they don't have serious serious
And
symptoms.
look, I know a lot of kids. All my friends have kids who are, in this age range, but 4 to 6, and they've all gotten COVID, and some of them didn't even know they have it. Some of them had fever for 2-3 hours, and they were fine. So yes, when you burden children of that age who really are not in real danger to wear a mask, meanwhile, us adults who are in more danger to, maybe more serious illnesses or death or whatnot, where I can go outside and not wear a mask, and this child has to go outside and still wear a mask, that's my issue. So yes, as they get older and they can make that decision for themselves, sure. But when a 4 and 5-year-old is told that you cannot physically go to school unless you're masked up for 9 hours a day, that's where I personally take issue with. I don't know if you.
I agree with it. But overall, I think we're coming towards the end of our podcast, so I'm going to say, I'm just happy that we're kind of going from these strict rules of shutting down the communities, shutting down schools to, I see a progression of kind of opening things up and going. I just don't want that strict requirements to be the norm, because I don't think that's sustainable, and I think people. Anyway, I think it would be better if we just move towards more like an opening up the community, opening up the economy, allowing children to not wear masks. If someone wants to wear a mask, please do it.
And I think
if
we'll
that
see
makes
a
you
lot of
feel,
people like
even
that.
if wearing a mask makes you feel psychologically more comfortable, do it. I'm not. When I see someone in mask, I'm not saying what the fuck are they. I don't say that. We have employees here who mask up double, triple. And I'm fine with it. I don't look at them differently. I understand you. I understand you have a subjective fear for something, whether that fear is reasonable or not. It doesn't matter. If it makes you feel comfortable to live your life, go for it. But I think that's one thing. But as a government requiring everybody else to do it is another thing. And I'm very happy that we're slowly moving towards opening up things and going back to what life was before this pandemic.
I agree with that. Definitely, obviously, that everybody is happy to go back to normal life, as quickly as possible. And I don't think anybody wants like strict requirements. It's just a difference in what people think is effective or not. And I don't want to wear a mask either. I do find it, miserable. Some people are like, it's not a burden. I hate it. I feel like I can't breathe. It's not a pleasant experience. I don't enjoy it. But
I mean, you don't love it?
No, I don't love it. But I also think it's important to think, because it only contributes to the
Yes.
Somebody say
Politicism.
Hey, what I'm trying to say? Politicization. Is that right? Politicization of the issue.
My defense is thinking this is my second language.
To have someone, you know what I mean? To talk about it off.
Yes.
I feel like we have to, when we talk about these issues, because I feel a responsibility to depoliticize it a little bit.
100%. Because here's why. Because if something gets politicized, it becomes a political issue with these politicians.
Right.
It will never get solved.
Right.
Gun violence, it's become politicized. It will never get solved, I think, unless these politicians, once they get a hold of an issue, it becomes they start getting engaged, and no reasonable solution comes forward. So. Right,
but having conversations that are based in what is efficacy? What do we know about it? What is it? That I feel is helpful to be I have these things, but I don't want to wear a mask. Nobody does. I don't think. Maybe if I was having a bad face day, then I would find joy in wearing it. Probably a lot of teenagers actually, hormonal acne or going to school oh yeah, I get to wear the mask, right? I wore one on a Zoom call once because I didn't want to put makeup on. I was like, nobody will know. Maybe there's an elderly person sitting across from me.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you guys so much. I think this was super, super interesting. I think we did a great job picking our guests for today. Whoop, whoop, I'll take credit for that. Just kidding. Thank you guys for watching. If you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like us on YouTube, and follow us on all podcast platforms. And we'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.